And what's up, you guys? Welcome to the Mango Grove. My name is Krisha, and this is Mango Macro number 2. Today is going to be an exciting one. I not only have Sean next to me. Sean, say hello.
Good morning, everyone.
Well, we also have a guest on the show, and that guest is no one other than Shervin, a seedling here at Mango. Shervin, say hello.
Hello, guys. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So today's topic of discussion is going to be the next world reserve currency.
Shervin was actually the one that suggested that we talk about this today. So good pick, Shervin. This is going to be an interesting one. I doubt we're going to be able to cover everything that needs to be covered in regards to this piece over here by Zoltan, but so let's consider this episode 1.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Of this,
Awesome.
because there's quite a lot to unpack here. I saw it initially from Lynn tweeting about it, referring to the podcast being one of the best. So I just had to listen to it, and I think everybody else in the group as well, the ones that are interested, have. So it's good to talk about it.
Yeah, so just to give you guys a heads up on which podcast we were referring to, it was this one right here, the Roundtable Insight by from Zoltan Pozsar and Ira Harris, and this was an amazing podcast. However, the audio was not too good, but the material in there was dense. So we're going to be talking about everything that we sort of dissected from this podcast. We're going to be giving you guys our thoughts on what was said, and then perhaps bring it all together.
We'll try.
Yeah.
Quick heads up, I've not listened to the podcast. As Krisha mentioned, the audio was a bit difficult for me to, at least for me. I've listened to at least a bit of it, a half of it, but I did read the entire piece, so I'll be able to drop some of my thoughts. I'm going to let you guys lead this conversation, though.
Sean's yeah. Okay, so so right now, Shervin, just to give you a heads up on what I have on my screen, I just have the YouTube page opened here, and Zoltan basically refers to the next system as being the Bretton Woods 3. Right, so we know that the Bretton Woods 1, the Bretton Woods 2, they were the two monetary sort of systems that we had in place for world trade. That's what sort of led the way. Now we have a Bretton Woods 3 that has come into discussion right now because of what's happened very, very recently with the sanctions being slapped on Russia. And now he mentions that briefly. Now, in that context, in the context of the next world reserve currency, I'm very intrigued as to what you managed to take away from here.
Yeah, he breaks it down quite interestingly. I think, as Sean mentioned in the report as well, in this podcast, he just kind of runs down through his thoughts and breaks it down. One of the most important things that he mentioned, which took my attention, was about 30 days ago, we wouldn't really be in a position to be having these conversations. But now, with some of the kind of domino effect of some of the decisions that have been made globally, we're at a point where kind of globalization is under threat, and kind of just-in-time supply chains are transitioning towards just-in-case supply chains, and also which then leads into countries or governments or entities wanting to accumulate commodities or having to hold it even more so that's necessary at a given time. That in itself has impacted and created a shift, which was quite interesting, because if we were to think about a world reserve currency, it needs to be one that is backed by essentially something that's in demand. And what is more in demand right now than commodities? So I think that kind of point of interest, that point of view, was quite interesting for me. But also he goes into a break it down of how different countries like Russia, China, and the US are the main countries that are impacting the situation.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to the world reserve currency, I think he kind of refers to the US dollar, the paper-backed reserve currency, not being that much of interest anymore for people, and them kind of having to go into a position where they can't have their essentially supplies inflated away through it being just a paper money supply.
Yeah.
But those are the main points for me, but there's a lot more to unpack, of course.
So the major takeaway that I got from here, now he was very, very well articulated. I'm talking about Zoltan in this interview. Now the major takeaway for me is how we are now likely, the world is likely going to be moving towards a currency, or like a monetary system that is also backed by something more physical, be it precious metals or even commodities. And now with the sanctions being slapped on Russia, that has undermined the entire US dollar system, the US dollar basically being used for world trade. Now a lot more countries are going to be like, okay, now they've placed these sanctions on Russia, right? What is stopping them from... They're looked at as like an enemy state kind of thing. If for whatever reason there's dissent from one country towards America, they could very well just cut them off of the entire system. And now that has technically undermined the entire system, and now you can see that the movement's already happening with trade. I believe it was Saudi Arabia that is in talks with China right now, and how they're going to be they're going to have trade, but it's going to be it's going to happen in those local currencies.
Yeah, so basically oil is going to be traded directly with the renminbi.
Yeah. So, and we're already seeing that happen, right? And it started some while ago. I think this is just going to be that next catalyst. It's going to be that next push that will likely speed the entire process up. So, and you're right. So the other takeaway was how commodity inequality is going to be a lot more prevalent than income inequality, right? So basically anything that can be eroded by inflation or confiscation is going to be at risk. Any asset that falls in those two categories, can be confiscated or can be inflated, is going to be at a massive sort of risk here, and that includes the US dollar, right? So that is the main sort of takeaway, that we are likely going to be moving into a more commodity-driven currency at this point.
So, with regards to sorry, just to add there, Sean, he also does mention in his podcast that how essentially reserve currencies are not just born reserve currencies from day one. They start to grow up to be reserve currencies. And I think what we're seeing is a shift, is a step at least in a direction away from the US dollar being that reserve currency, for all the reasons that are mentioned in the podcast and what we just discussed here.
Yep.
Purely because countries would much rather hold the things that they need to prevent that commodity inequality that you just mentioned by any means necessary, rather than hold paper debt, which treasury bonds would be.
Yep. Yeah, and I think Kusha really nailed a key point over there on the commodity
Inequality?
Yeah, inequality being more prevalent.
Yeah.
For me, my big takeaways were here, because Kusha is looking at me expectantly.
No.
I have three big simple takeaways from Zoltan's paper here. I think it was honestly a masterpiece that I'm going to have to go through over and over again. But the three big ones for me was, one, how he mentioned that okay, for those of you who are listening and are not familiar with Zoltan, you guys need to know that Zoltan Pozsar over here is the man, all right? Especially when it comes to the financial system, the current financial system, the plumbing. He is the man that everyone listens to. Everyone wants to know his opinion, right? He's that guy of our generation that the smartest minds are listening to. So in a way, this guy making a statement like, hey, this is the initial formation of the Bretton Woods 3 system, that means something, right? He's the kind of guy that gets to set the beginning of a narrative for decades to come. Okay, so that's Zoltan Pozsar for you guys. So the big takeaways was him mentioning that, hey, we are moving on over to Bretton Woods 3, that is going to be a hybrid of Bretton Woods 1 and Bretton Woods 2. And that was really important to me, at least, when he used the word hybrid. Because what was Bretton Woods 1? Bretton Woods 1 was essentially a gold standard in a way, right? Not your perfect gold standard, albeit it was the US dollar linked to a gold pegging, and the rest of the fiat currencies linked to the US dollar. So indirectly, everyone was linked to the US dollar, to the gold, right? To gold, right? And then Bretton Woods 2 was, hey, let's go off, let's get away from gold completely, and we're going to move to a pure fiat based US dollar petro systems, or rather the petrodollar system, right? So we transitioned away from gold completely, right? And we became more fiat-based, more paper-based. Now, however, what Zoltan is saying is we are going to be, and this is really important, okay, this is the big takeaway for me. We're going to be moving to a hybrid that is a combination of the Bretton Woods 1 system that was a hard currency, right? We are based off hard currencies, and Bretton Woods 2. All right, so he didn't say we're moving to a hard currency, a hard-based system, which is what Dalio would suggest that we're doing, right? He's saying we're going to move to a hybrid, and then he follows that up with the fact that the euro dollar, or the West rather, is going to be losing its prominence. Rather, their currency is going to lose their strength, and they're going to be moving to an east side of the world, currency commodity world, right? So he's essentially suggesting that the east side of the world now is going to have their currency strengthen, along with the fact that they're going to be hoarding commodities because of a commodity insecurity world that we're going to be moving into. Right, and he used that term, commodity insecurity. Yeah. Countries are going to become more and more commodity insecure. And then he followed that up with what Sherwin mentioned, that we're going to move from a very, very efficient system of having everything just in time, right? We're going to have our commodities just in time when we need it, to a, hey, we're going to have our commodities just in case.
Yeah.
We may not need it, but just in case, all right? I'll give you guys a really, really good example. I came across some numbers where India, for example, because there's a lot of noise around India trading with Russia, even though the sanctions, blah, 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 blah. And people are giving India a lot of flack for that. And here's what stood out to me. Usually, the average amount of oil India trades with Russia in a given year is around 11 million barrels of oil. We are only 3 months into this year, right? Around within the first 3 to 4 months of this year, India had already accumulated 7 million barrels of oil. So we're not at the end of the year at all, not even close to the end of the year. And we're only in the 4th month of the year, right? And India has already accumulated that many barrels of oil. So what does that suggest to me? India is willing to give up their US dollar reserves or whatever currency reserves that they have, right? Fiat reserves, for a commodity that they need, oil. Yeah. Another stat was, hey, wheat is becoming more and more and more in demand, and countries are beginning to hoard their wheat reserves. They're hoarding that, right? They're not keeping just enough. So those are the two big takeaways for me, where he said that, one, we are moving to a hybrid of Bretton 1 and Bretton 2, right? So the east side of the world, those currencies are going to start strengthening. It's not just the fact that they're going to be commodity-based currencies. It's the east side that's going to start strengthening. And what does that mean? It means that there's going to be less demand for the west side, which means euros and dollars, correct?
Right.
So usually, and this was the third big takeaway, guys. This was the big third takeaway. So to reiterate, first, we are moving towards a commodity-based world, right? Just like Sherwin and Krisha are really, really beautifully iterated to us. But secondly, we're moving to a hybrid-based system on the east side of the world. But third, all of this is going to have consequences on the west side of the world, where people, or rather the world, usually would have accumulated dollars and euros and recycled those into treasuries. So usually when countries sold commodities to the west side of the world, they sold them for dollars. Right. And those dollars essentially went back into the system, and they used those dollars to buy treasuries, right? And remember, what have I been explaining to you guys for the past few months now? When you buy treasuries, what happens to the yields?
The yields go down.
Yields go down.
Right. Down.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yields go down. But now that's taken away because they are not exchanging their commodities for dollars anymore.
Right.
Right? So this had a double impact, guys, because when the West bought commodities, they would print money to buy commodities. They would create dollars to buy commodities, take those commodities, give it to the east side of the world. The east side would take those dollars that were printed, by the way, right? They were printed, and then buy treasuries. So that would put a deflationary pressure on yields, on interest rates.
Right.
But now they're not doing that. They just, or rather, Zoltan is saying they're not going to do that because we're moving into this new regime, Bretton Woods 3. They're going to basically be taking whatever new east side of the world currencies. They're not going to be buying US. They're not going to be accepting dollars because they don't have dollars. They don't need to buy treasuries because they're not buying treasuries. Interest rates are going to go up. But at the same time, because of the commodity insecurity, commodities are going to be more in demand and commodity prices are going to go up. So we might be moving into a world where interest rates are going up and commodity prices are going up, where inflation is going up while interest rates are going up. That was one of the biggest takeaways for me that I think not enough people are highlighting, because that's going to change everything.
So what exactly is stopping? So he focused very much on the East currencies, right? So the Eastern currencies like the Chinese yuan and other various currencies. I think his main thing was on the Chinese yuan. But what is stopping any of the Western currencies from also, from actually taking that spot as also a commodity driven currency? What if they also start ramping up their commodity reserves in that sense? So what is the narrative on there? So now ESG could be one where the question, right? So why Eastern and why not the Western?
The past regime, and Zoltan says puts this really, really succinctly as well. The past regime was this: it's our currency, your problem, right? So essentially, pandemic hits, right? 2020, the US prints a shitload of money, right? But most of a lot, not a lot, if not most, of that printing was exported. So that inflation was exported to the rest of the world. In fact, I was reading a investment subreddit of some obscure country because I was just interested in that country, and they were talking about this. And someone asked this question. He's saying, this guy said, "Wait a minute, you're telling me that the U.S. prints money and our country is bidding up those dollars? Good for them, I guess, but holy shit, that's bad for us, because essentially the US is exporting their inflation to us, to our country, right? Because other countries were basically hoarding US dollars, because again, there's a lot of US dollar denominated debt to other countries around the world. A good example of this is recently the entire Sri Lanka debacle. They are asking for loans, and all of those loans from various countries around the world are denominated in US dollars, right? Even though the US is not giving them those dollars, right? It's the other countries giving them those dollars. But now that's all going away, right? Before it was our currency, your problem. Now it's turned into our commodities, your problem. And Zoltan emphasizes this. He says, okay, now what countries are going to say is, we are going to be selling our commodities, and it's your problem as to what currency we ask for or what we ask for in return.
Right.
So that's what Russia is doing. It's our commodity, your effing problem. Deal with it, right? And that's a regime change that we're going through right now. And it's guys, all of you who are watching this podcast right now, you guys need to understand that what's happening right now with this Bretton Woods 3 paper put out with even Zoltan, this is history in the making. Books are going to be written around what is happening in these days, right? That we are in a regime. In fact, books have already been written, right? Zoltan Sherwin mentioned in the beginning of this podcast that it was too early to be talking about these things up until a week or a month ago. But the truth is, there have been thought leaders and historians who were already talking about this. Ray Dalio's entire book, I really suggest reading it. It's lengthy, but it's worth reading. He talks about this in his book. I believe it's named "Principle of a Changing World Order." And that's exactly what we're going through, right? The principles of dealing with a world-changing order. And we're going through a world-changing order right now. The world is changing. The order of the world is changing. And he outlines how this has happened historically in the past. Then we have the fourth turning that also talks about this, where there's a catalyst that usually causes something huge to happen, right? And then we have sovereign individual. All these concepts, all these three books together, sovereign individual, fourth turning, Ray Dalio's great book, all of them are coming together with the culmination of Zoltan essentially calling it out and saying, hey, it has begun. Bretton Woods 3.
Yeah.
It's incredible, huh? The saying's always been around when it says there are decades where nothing happens and then there are weeks where decades happen. It's just really interesting to be living in that week. And I think we're in a great position to be able to kind of talk about it, but also learn from one another. So it's a great opportunity for us. That's how I see it, as a kind of, if you wanted to think about it from a selfish individual perspective. But
So
Oh yeah.
yeah, the world is changing. The world is changing.
And these discussions are so key, right? This is one of the reasons, one of the goals of Mango was to have these kind of mastermind discussion groups, and I'm so glad that we're doing this, because yeah, I'm learning a lot in this conversation.
So do you think this
Hey,
is like all of this is because of the unraveling of, at least according to me, I feel like we're seeing globalization sort of unravel at this particular juncture for this whole commodity and currency crisis that we're having right now. We're moving into a system now. Russia's sort of already led the way in that, in terms of, okay, I'm pricing my oil in rubles. Now that how you get the rubles is your problem, right? So now Russia has already sort of set like a precedent right here. Now, do you think that is also alluding to like the unraveling of globalization as we know it?
I'll let Chauvin answer this before I go on.
Do you know, the thing is, it's hard to say that the globalization is going to end, but definitely we are going to go in a period where everyone's going to start to think about having to hoard commodities and resources and having to double up on supply chains. Because if we do go to a point where the ties do sever severely, then there are countries that are going to be left out, needing a lot more, right? But of course, that's just a gut feeling. I don't know the details of it per se.
Yeah, and we're sort of seeing like a lot of countries virtue signal, because if there's one sort of historic thing that's always not, it's a historic sort of phenomenon in a way, in that whenever there's a monetary shift, right, when something drastic has to happen for the world monetary system, it's usually war that brings about that change or that shift. And now we see a war that's happening between Ukraine and Russia. Right, but everything that's being all these sanctions and then all these things that are being placed on Russia, they're mainly virtue signaling in a sense, because their commodity market wasn't hit. The sanctions did not affect the commodity market, right? So you can see, and so that's sort of it's making me think, right? That sort of drives to your point, Shervin, in that, you know, they're still going to be a lot more sort of reliant on each other for trade now, specifically with things like oil, with commodities like oil, because that is a natural resource that is very geography specific. So they cannot even risk the whole thing of starting a war, because they're now cutting themselves out of key resources. It's like a game of Catan suddenly.
I believe Russia came out and said something along the lines of, Europe will pay for their energy blackmailing or something like that. They said something along those lines, right? Where, essentially, Russia saying that we will get payback for the sanctions that you guys put on us.
Yeah.
It goes back to that the idea that Zoltan said, our commodity is your problem. Right, so the countries who have the commodities at the end of the day are going to be in the position of power, right? Currencies be damned, because we need to feed our people, and you need to feed your people. So if you want to feed your people without the people revolting and going on a rampage against the government, you're going to pay us in the currency that we deem appropriate at the price we deem appropriate. If you guys want these commodities, because hey, energy and food, those are the two commodities that can cause revolutions.
Yeah.
We're seeing it in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka. Gas prices are going through the roof, and people are losing their minds. People can't afford food, and now that's impacting medicine. Like, there's a cascade effect on the people. I read that inflation is by far the worst thing that a policy decision maker or a government can deal with, right? It's the kind of thing that causes a regime change.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Like, what will be the few like precursors to, you know, a shift in this monetary regime change? Like, what do you think would be the first sort of signals to look out for?
I kind of think one of them's already happened. The fact that maybe people are starting to realize that they don't necessarily need to be going through the dollar for every single world trade transaction. That individual countries are able to set up different funnels and tunnels of financial communication back and forth, and that itself could be an interesting step towards a direction where things start to change. But what is the next thing? I'm probably going to ask Sean for that.
So
ball is right in your court, mate.
So could you repeat the question, Krisha? What are the signs for
for the next monetary sort of change? What should we sort of look out for if this whole world order that we know right now, that we have all sort of been born into, has to change, or is changing rather? What would be like those first signs that, okay, there is a shift? Because that shift, now Lynn Alden actually had a really, really nice tweet on this, in that's depending on where you are on what side you pick, right? In terms of what sort of assets you hold, that is going to determine the winners. It's going to sort of separate the winners from the losers. So it's really about understanding, okay, when does a shift happen, and what do we look out for to give us the tip off on the shift?
So again, I think it really comes down to this idea of what you're prioritizing as a country. Right. As soon as you move away from the idea of, hey, I believe in the efficiency of the globalization of the world, to, hey, I'm moving into a just in case hoarding mentality, that is you essentially losing faith in the current world financial system being able to deliver on its promises. Right. So when Bretton Woods 1 and Bretton Woods 2 was put in place, we essentially had globalization, we had smooth trade, we had efficiencies, and all of that was extremely deflationary, right? With everything that has been happening over the past 2 years, the pandemic and the war put together, those are two massive catalysts that have essentially pushed people, or rather the two huge big straws that broke the camel's back of the doubt that countries already had in their minds in regards to whether the current financial system and those who hold the power can deliver on their promises of maintaining that deflationary aspect that stemmed from the efficiency of the system that was promised, right? And a lot of this is narrative building, right? It's the faith in the system. That faith is being eroded. And now governments are acting on that erosion of that faith. Right, you're not seeing countries hoard the same amount of treasuries anymore. We're seeing that with China. They've been selling their treasuries for the longest time. I don't think they hold nearly as much, or just a fraction, or they're saying we have enough. Russia have sold all of their treasuries, right? A lot of people think that, but a lot of people have been asking me, why did Russia have dollars to begin with, right? If they were going to do this, I don't think they did. If I understand correctly, they had euro dollars. They were holding euro dollars, and that's what was sanctioned. Yeah. Right? That's what was sanctioned. They didn't think that even Europe would go ahead and weaponize their financial system against Russia, but they did. That essentially erodes the trust in the financial system even more, right? So I think that is the biggest sign where faith in the current financial system, which is essentially fiat, right, completely gets eroded. And then the next big catalyst is war. And Dalio really punches this point through in his book, where at times of war, so we go through phases of currencies, where you always start off as a hard currency, and then when people tend to forget why you had a hard currency to begin with, you become a little softer, right? So you have a layer 1 fiat on top of the hard currency just for convenience purposes. Then you go to layer 2, and then you finally move away from the hard currency completely, and you forget about the hard currency, and the world just thinks that, hey, everything will be fine. Okay.
Right.
And then eventually there is a catalyst like what we have right now, either pandemic, war, all of it together, and then the countries who are at war with each other, they definitely will not trust each other's currencies, right? Russia is not going to accept Ukraine's currency. Ukraine will not accept Russia's currency. But then on the flip side, even countries around the world start doubting these currencies. They're like, wait a minute, if I want to even help Russia, okay, I don't know whether Russia is going to win this war. So I'm not going to accept their currency. A really good example of this is World War II. Right, Switzerland, who maintained a neutral position, was it Switzerland? I think it was Switzerland, or was it Sweden? One of the two. They maintained a neutral position in the war. They were trading with Germany, but they refused to accept the Reichsmark. They were only accepting gold. So they were hoarding gold, trading with Germany, right? And that essentially points to this very idea over here, where during times of war, you shift away from a soft currency and you move towards a hard currency.
Right.
That's why Bretton Woods 1 was based on a hard currency, because people lost faith in each other's currencies, right? And then again, if you think back to what Germany did in going to countries like Belgium and basically invading them and stealing their gold, it was all about the hard currency, because Germany knew that no matter what, okay, whether other countries believed in them or not, they could use that gold, that hard currency, to trade with other currencies, to trade with other countries and get what they want. They would reroute it, Krisha, through like weird channels going through Africa, etc., and trade with countries without those countries knowing that they actually traded with Germany, right? Because it was a hard currency that everyone would accept either way. So I think that's what we're going through right now, and Dalio talks about that, where eventually when that catalyst happens and that war pushes people to stop trusting each other's currencies, everyone's like, I don't know if I can trust your currency. I want gold, I want commodities. So people will be willing to trade for wheat to feed their people. People will be willing to trade for oil to run their country, energy, and they'd be willing to trade for gold. And possibly smaller countries, depending on the liquidity, are also going to be willing to accept Bitcoin, right? Russia has already said that they're willing to trade in Bitcoin. El Salvador will definitely trade in Bitcoin. So I think that's where we're moving towards. Zoltan himself said, by the way, in a paper prior to this paper, that Bitcoin may also be an option. Definitely, if it still survives the decade to come.
Oh, wow. Sherman, do you have any thoughts
there
on
it is.
Yeah.
No, I would just want to thank Sean. That's great, actually. You've put it together really well for us all, and I took a lot out of that. And I want to kind of take this opportunity to implore any fellow seedlings who are listening to kind of take advantage of this, because the more you engage with us and the more you communicate, ask questions, share these podcasts, and ask questions directly about them, what we could do is collect them and bring them up into these discussion points. And I'm part of this conversation and I'm learning, and I'm pretty sure every other seedling who is interested in this stuff is as well. So this is great. Thank you.
Yes, if you guys have any, that's right, the questions are going to be key.
Yeah, leave your questions down in the comments below, guys, so that way it's easier for us to collect the questions. A lot of people tend to PM me their questions, and it's hard for me to keep up with those. And it also helps the channel and YouTube's algorithm when you guys ask questions in the actual comment section.
Yeah.
I think that's good for part one, for sure.
I think
covered a lot, way more than I thought we'd cover.
We have it right here, and that's why it just, for the sake of brevity and to not overwhelm the audience, let them sit with this, and questions in the comments section, and tell us what it is that you want to hear about, perhaps in the next Mango Macro every Wednesday. Guys, are you ready to say adieu?
Yes, absolutely.
Alrighty.
Great to be here.
I'm just hoping that we actually did record everything. Jesus Christ.
Of course we did. Come on now.
Really?
We did.
Okay.
Come on. Alrighty, guys.
In
All right,
Krisha,
sure. Next time you got to do a backup record on your side, just in case. All right, remember, we're moving into a world of just in case.
Just in case. To think that Sean was like, I didn't watch the video, guys.
I haven't watched it
but
yet.
he did. But he's a reader, so he read the reports,
read the
and
full
great.
report,
some
everything in
amazing
there.
insights. So guys, if you have to rewind and watch them again, go ahead and do so, and let us know what you guys think about today's Mango Macro. It would be much appreciated. And with this, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hit the like button, as well as subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And we will see you in the next Mango Macro. With this, trade safely, trade stress-free, trade the mango way, trade the easy way. Ciao.
She was gonna say hit the smash button. Hit the smash button, guys. Smash it.
Smash
Ciao,
the hit
guys. Smash that button.